Hello everyone, my name's Murgonk, and welcome to the Stormkeep. Today I'm joined with Lord Podcaster Paul and Knight Podcaster James.
Hello, how's everyone doing?
How's it going, guys? How are we doing today?
So after a bunch of tournaments, we decided to finally talk about Stormcast as allied units, which I think will be really very relevant given the recent grand tournament that happened this past
Yeah,
weekend.
and it's a shame because I wanted to talk about this, last year, but it just kept getting put off because of the holidays and because different tournaments were coming up. So here it is. We finally did it. We finally did the thing. So, okay, so Stormcast is allied units. Why even bother making this video? Because we're the Stormkeep. Why do we care about what other factions are doing? Well, it's because Stormcast have really bad allegiance abilities, but they have fantastic stats. They have Rend 2, Damage 3, 3-up saves, 12-inch flying moves, all kinds of wonky abilities. But our allegiance abilities are terrible, right? Like Staunch Defender, all our command traits are bad. Most of our artifacts are bad. Most of our spells are pretty bad. No high damage output or anything like that. It was the first third edition book, and it shows, right? It's definitely got that like Primaris Space Marine at the start of 8th edition feel to it, where everything's this is setting a new baseline, and they're going to power creep up from this, and then at some point we're going to get a new book with expanded concepts that they've refined throughout the edition. So that's fine for what it is. So other armies really want the kind of stuff that Stormcast have, right? Like Fire Slayers love having our faster units, like our chariots and our drakes. Idoneth love having some tanky stuff up front, and they really enjoy having run and charge fulminators on tides with the right subfaction. Cities of Sigmar in particular love using Stormcast units because Cities is not a very tanky army and it's not like super punchy. It's got a lot of neat tricks and focuses on larger units, so we can come in here with these elite units and really offset a lot of those weaknesses. So let's talk about what you give up when you do this, because we've been thinking, our headspace has been Stormcast allegiance for so long, you almost don't even think about what you're giving up in particular. So we say our allegiance abilities are bad, but let's actually go through and do like a precise list of what you'd be giving up if you were to use Stormcast outside of a Stormcast army. So the first thing, I'd say the most important thing, is Scions of the Storm. That ability is huge. Yep. And when Stormcast have to foot slog across the board, it's a different game, right? Like if you're bringing a squad of, like, let's say Annihilators, if they don't have Scions of the Storm, they're not doing anything in that game. They're basically just a waste of points.
Yep.
So it makes us really, as allies, focus on the faster units and the shooting units and things that have unique utility.
I wouldn't even say Raptors are in that. Like, I mean, with the exception of one certain living city that we will talk about, if you can't protect your Raptors and they can just get shot off the board or they can't position themselves properly, that's a waste of a unit.
Yeah, Raptors are very fragile, and it seems like they don't, not only because of ally point limits, but because you can't put them in Scions, like you're saying. If you can't protect them, they're a waste of points. Like a shark will just fly by and shoot a D3 shot at it and kill like one or two Raptors. It's crazy how fragile they are. Without Scions of the Storm, they're really not worth their points. So in addition to Scions, you also give up the Stormkeep, which it's not that big a deal because Stormkeep allegiance is not great right now. Maybe it might become more valuable if the meta ever shifts more towards horde units, and that could happen with the upcoming battle tomes focusing on infantry and cavalry units rather than just monsters like the last few have. It could certainly be the case that we see that meta shift happen, so that is a relevant ability to keep in mind. We give up Blaze of Glory, which is a consistent source of high damage, as everyone knows. You give up all the Stormcast enhancements, and some of them you're gonna take for granted, right? Like command traits, no big deal, whatever. We always take the universal command traits anyway, so that's fine. You give up artifacts, so you give up your Mirror Shield, and that's about it. I guess the luck Stone, yeah. You give up your spells, you give up your prayers, you give up mount traits, you give up your holy command. So if you take Raptors, for example, like we were talking about, outside of Stormcast allegiance, they can't double tap. Same with Judicators, right? They can't do the double tap, so and a lot of their point cost seems to be wrapped up in that ability.
So it's a heavy blow, yeah.
Yeah, losing Translocation is another big one, right? Like that combination of Translocation and Thunderbolt Volley is what's currently keeping Stormcast the allegiance as a competitive force in tournament scene. You also give up all of your Storm hosts, right? You can't take any sub-factions, which means you can't use Gardas. You can't use Bastion. You can't use any character that's locked to a Storm host. Any character that has specific abilities that work with a specific Storm host, you can't use them. And you give up all of your Stormcast battle line. And a lot of people might overlook this, but your draft goths can't do it. Your drakes can't be battle line, because even though they're not locked to a storm host, you have to have a Stormcast army to make your Stormdrakes battle line. Vigilors, Dracoths, Paladins and Knights Excelsior, Vanguard units and Astral Templars, Prosecutors and Tempest Lords, none of those are viable battle line options as allies, right? So, and in general, allies don't count towards battle line limits, but it's worth noting that you lose the battle line status, which could affect certain battle plans. And you also lose access to using the Stormcast Endless spells. As per the FAQ, you cannot use faction Endless spells outside of that faction. So you can't bring a Stormcast wizard in a city's army and cast the Everblaze Comet. You have to be a Stormcast army to use that spell. It would be really fun to cast Everblaze Comet in like a Seraphon army along with Comet's Call. That would have been cool.
But nope.
So first, let's talk about Stormcast as allied units, and then we'll go into a discussion about Stormcast as coalition in the Cities of Sigmar. But first, a quick discussion on allies. Stormcast can be taken as allies in Cities of Sigmar, which they can also be coalition in there. I think the text may be a little wonky. It might say you have to have coalition. Fire Slayers can use them. Idoneth Deepkin can use Stormcast, Caradron, Seraphon, and Sylvaneth. And in general, allies are max 200 points in a 1,000 point game or 400 points in a 2,000 point game, which means there's some units that are just too expensive to ever use as allies, right? Stardrakes, Krondys, Karazai, they just can't use them. They're more than 400 points, no dice. And a lot of the reinforced units that make Stormcast so good, like our Fulminators, any Dracoth unit really, Long Strikes, those can't be reinforced because they'd be too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
In general, allies can't take any kind of enhancement, so they can't learn spells, they can't learn prayers, they can't take a command trait, they can't be the general. They don't count towards battle line, but they do count towards your behemoth and artillery. So if you're bringing some kind of phoenix, that does count as a behemoth in your army, for example.
Yep. So you better hope they're self-sufficient if you're gonna take them.
Yeah. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the Stormcast units that are pretty good allies in other armies. And we'll start off with one of the ones that sees the most play, I'd say, as an ally, is the Celestant Prime. Because he doesn't use Scions of the Storm, he has his own reserve ability. He's able to use that kind of Stormcast flavor. Like pretty much everything about him is on his War Scroll. Right, like he goes in reserve on his War Scroll, he charges up his weapon on his War Scroll. All of that power comes with this model. He almost gets nothing from the Stormcast Allegiance itself.
Nope, absolutely nothing.
Yeah, so you can just leave him in reserve for a turn, and then on turn 2, drop him into play, get a guaranteed 12-inch charge with his ability, and then you'd have 5 attacks on 3s and 2s, minus 3 rend, and 3 damage. So he just swings in there for 12 or 15 damage pretty reliably. And
plus mortal wounds.
Plus mortal wounds,
from
yeah.
From the Scepter, yeah.
The Scepter is also really good for punishing castle armies, which I think are going to become more common as we move forward, because we're going into, people are spamming dragons and really fast units, and what that means is people are going to start adopting defensive formations, and dropping a D3 mortal wound on everything in that kind of formation is quite potent.
It's really powerful on Death. Like, Death uses a lot of really squishy wizards. If you get 2 turns of that Scepter, you might kill like 2 or 3 support heroes. And if Nighthaunt comes back with a vengeance, considering they have Ethereal, it's going to be even better as an ability.
Yep, they have some 4-wound heroes in Nighthaunt. The Guardian of Souls is very squishy.
Mm-hmm.
Seraphon have this issue as well. They have a lot of 4 and 5 wound support heroes, and you can just clear out a lot of them if you can drop a bunch of mortal wounds like this.
Mm-hmm.
Celestant Prime's also 8 wounds with a 3-up save and a 4-up ward, so he's fairly durable. He's not the squishy hammer he used to be, and he takes up a sub-commander slot, which I find is some armies really, really want the sub-commander slot, and others have too many as it is, right?
Yeah.
So it's just noting, it's not good or bad, it's just a thing. He is unique, so he can't benefit from anything, but as an ally, he wouldn't be able to anyway. And there's actually some competitive lists that already use him today. Sometimes you'll see him at tournaments. You might be in a Seraphon list, or Caradron, or Idoneth. I've seen him used in Cities of Sigmar as well, but that's not as an ally, and we'll talk about Coalition later.
Daughters of Cain used to use him before Marathi broke up her friendship with Sigmar.
Yes, Sigmar with friendship over.
Yeah.
Marathi is my new best friend. Or Idoneth, yeah.
I was going to say that, but you said it first.
So yeah, 325 points for a really good beat stick. It deploys off the table, can't be touched until he deploys. It's guaranteed 12-inch charge. He can clear an objective. Not like, 15 damage on turn 2 is pretty good. 21 damage if you keep him until turn 3. He's good. He's a fine use of 325 points in a lot of armies because he fills a lot of gaps. He's mobile, he's tanky, he does decent damage. Yeah, a lot
The
of
best
armies.
part is he'll make your opponent really, really nervous. Your opponent will play cagey as hell because they know the Celestant Prime can drop anytime.
Yep, and usually you won't deploy him turn 1, but you can. If your opponent castles up, you can just deploy him turn 1 and, 3 attacks on turn 1 and then 3 attacks on turn 2 versus 5 attacks on turn 2. It's not that different, right?
Nope. It's perfectly okay.
Yeah. So he's good. As an ally, I would rate him as A tier. He sees play in some tournament lists already, so he's obviously good enough to include in those armies. He fills gaps in what those armies are missing.
Agree.
Next up, I wanted to mention Aventis Firestrike because a lot of the things that we like about the Toralon, and this could work for the Toralon as well. It doesn't have to just be Aventis, but he's a fast flying hero monster. 12 wounds, 3 up save, heals D3 every turn, has high bravery for heroic recovery. He can't learn any spells as a unique character, but he can cast 2 spells, so he can do his War Scroll spell and then Mystic Shield. And I think that's not bad for 310 points. A lot of armies are lacking like a solid monster support piece right now, which is really useful for unlocking monstrous takeover and other battle tactics. You can do a lot worse for 310 points, or 285 for a standard Toralon. So he's not seeing any play right now, probably because a lot of his points are wrapped up in that Comet Trail ability, which increases hit rolls around him by 1. And that only affects
that's only limited to Stormcast. No, cities, Hammerhal and Stormcast.
Yeah, if you use the regular Toralon, it's any cities and any Stormcast. If you use Aventis, it's Hammers of Sigmar and Hammerhal. But yeah, just wanted to give a shout out to the Toralon. I'm a big fan of the Toralon in general, and I think it's not a bad ally choice. If you have like 300 points kicking around and you want to add in a monster for rampages, for tactics, this is a fast flying one that can sometimes cast Mystic Shield. Next up, the Knight-Incantor. What else is there to say about this guy? He's 125 points for a Dispel Scroll. And sometimes he casts a spell. That's,
very valuable, actually.
Yeah, it's incredibly valuable. In Warhammer Fantasy, Dispel Scrolls were so good, people would pay points for them. Well, as one of these order factions that we listed earlier, you can do the same thing.
Yeah, well, not everyone can take Teclis, so this is your cheaper option.
Yep. And you can, Spirit Storm is not the worst spell in the game. -1 charge.
Honestly, if you're in a castle formation, -1 to charge is not a bad thing for a castle to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, Knight-Incantor, good model. I've used him in some lists, definitely, before. Haven't found rune for him in 3rd edition, but I remember in 2nd edition I was playing him in Fyreslayers, and I was playing him in Caradron. And
I just think Magic is not as relevant now, because only Tzeentch and Lumineth care about it. Everything else you can reasonably beat, I think.
Yeah, it's not as big a deal as it was before.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine, because I don't like Magic being too reliable and too powerful. It feels weird. The game should be focused on units and abilities and interactions. So another one worth mentioning is the Lord-Ordinator, just because he's one of the few units that affects Order war machines, and he gives them all +1 hit around him, which is a varying value. It's like it was pretty good in 2nd edition. It's okay now. There's just the +1 hit is not the best buff in the world. Right? It used to be a lot better. These days, +1 hit is, I don't know,
fairly common, fairly widespread.
It's easy to get. He's slow, but he's one of our few heroes that does synergize with other armies, so I thought he might be worth mentioning. I know Caradron have used him. They'll drop in a bunch of, they'll put a Lord-Ordinator with a bunch of gunships, fire off their salvo, and then teleport them the next turn. And then
I'll say it this way: his value is equivalent to how good your war machines are. If your war machines are good and you don't want to spend CP, you'd rather spend it on redeploys and all-out defenses and rallies and unleash hell. Sure, 130 points. Yeah, he's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's also an aura, right? Which doesn't cost a command point and stacks with all-out attack if you really need it, right? If you're trying to get through a -1 hit, he's cheap enough that you can,
or something.
Yeah, he's cheap enough that you can bring a ballista with him as an ally in a 2,000 point army. So really, not the worst pick at all. Ballistas are what, 130?
130, yes.
Yeah, so you could pack in 2 ballistas with this guy, 260 plus 140. And
that's not a bad pack.
400 point core, add some shooting to pretty much any army. Some Ren 3 shooting, which, as we are seeing, Ren 3 shooting is pretty good right now.
Yep, I stand Rent 3 shooting. I'm a fan.
Yeah, unfortunately it's D6, but it's still good.
Well, you can't have everything.
Can't have it all. Let's talk about the Stormdrake Guard as an ally unit. They are spectacular. 18 wounds and 3 up save. They have a 12-inch flying move. They have the monster keyword, which is really good for rampages and tactics, like we talked about with the Torlon.
And objectives. They're 5 models each.
5 models apiece, yeah. Once per game, they can move in the hero phase. Their breath averages about 2 mortal wounds a model, which is still good, but it can spike crazy high, and it can do potentially 12 mortal wounds if you get lucky. Lances do pretty good damage on the charge. You can rampage defensively and offensively. You ignore spells on a 4-up. They can instant kill stuff. Sometimes that instant kill ability is really lackluster from my experience, but sometimes it matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a troop.
I did play a game against Nurgle recently, and instant kill came out pretty decently, but I just did want to say that I did charge a Glockkin and basically killed in that turn, so.
There you go.
There you go, yeah. Why not?
They are troops, which means you can put them in Hunters of the Heartland, and they can ignore other monstrous rampages. So they're a monster that ignores monsters, which is very rare. There's not much of that in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And they're currently seeing a lot of play, if you guys are watching the tournament scene. But I also wanted to give a shout out to Bill Souza's 5-0 Fireslayer list from a couple weeks back, before they updated the Fireslayer War Scrolls. He ran a beautiful list that had, I think, 25 Auric Hearthguard, 20 Hearthguard Berserkers, a bunch of foot heroes, and it was this really slow foot slogging list. And then he added in these 2 Drakes to balance it out. And that's the kind of thing that Stormcast can offer to a lot of armies.
Yeah, a lot of armies don't either have mobility or good monsters. Fireslayers being one of them. I would say even Ideneth is one of them. Like, their only monster is that turtle. So being able to have that power with other board control elements or hard-hitting melee components, and yeah, you've got that's the thing. Like, it's so strange. All the power Stormdrake Guard have are in their War Scroll. They get almost nothing from the Stormcast Legions.
Yeah, and that's probably why they're in so many Order armies at LVO. They're very popular ally choice.
Yep.
For better or for worse.
Mm-hmm.
And the last ally Stormcast that I want to talk about are the Aetherwings. They're 3 models for 65 points. B tier. Good job. They did it. Like that enough. Sometimes you just have 65 points left over in your list, right? And you're like, oh, yeah. Okay.
I mean, yeah, pretty much all the cities list, even if they find 60, 70 points, they'll take an Aetherwing unit. It's just a good unit to have as a screen, as a good thing for Savage Spearheads, a good thing to just, hold an objective and deny some backline deep strikes. It's a good unit.
Yeah, you'll get no value out of the +1 hit, because you're not going to bring long strikes as an ally alongside them. That's just not efficient. And,
oh god, no.
But they're 3 models with a 12-inch flying move for 65 points. There's not. They don't even need to have an attack profile. They could have no damage, literally none, and they'd still find play.
Hey, you say that. My Aetherwings killed a Grunta last tournament. So be careful. It was with Blaze of Glory though, so it doesn't count.
Oh, okay. So you gave them a hand grenade. And...
yeah.
So as we talked about, you don't get Blaze of Glory, the high source of consistent damage, outside of a Stormcast Allegiance. So if you use them as allies, you don't give your pigeons hand grenades.
Womp womp.
Okay, so Stormcast and Cities of Sigmar are quite a bit different, and this is going to make up the bulk of our podcast today, because when you're a coalition unit, you have different rules than an ally unit, right? So let's talk about the kind of bonuses you get for Stormcast. So in general, regardless of which city you pick, Stormcast units would get +1 to cast endless spells. They would get a whole host of city-specific abilities, and they are coalition, not ally, like I said, which means you can take enhancements, and there is no point limit. So you could take, theoretically, 1,200 points of Stormcast in a list.
Yep.
And it's not a Stormcast list, because that's just how coalition works. It's part of the army. Don't get the keywords unless the abilities specifically say you do. In the case of cities, you do gain the Cities of Sigmar keyword, which is really, really good, and probably why it took first place in LVO.
I mean, it makes, not to bring this out too early, but ironically enough, it makes Stormcast better in some ways in cities than they are in their own allegiance, and we'll talk about this later.
Oh, definitely, yeah. It's potentially a problem even, but once a new I think once the new Cities of Sigmar book comes out, it won't be an issue anymore.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some restrictions. Only 1 in 4 units in your army can be a Stormcast Eternal. That's a pretty standard coalition rule across the board. If you have a coalition rule, it's usually 1 in 4 units in your army, just to make sure like literally half the units in your army are not this faction.
Yeah.
Can't be the general.
Which basically means, yeah, can't be the general. So basically, you're taking a bunch of support heroes and chaff, and then you're taking Stormcast.
Right. And it works out really well for Stormcast because we have really powerful hammer units and really bad allegiance abilities and kind of okay support heroes.
Yep, we have mediocre chaff. I'll say it that way. Like, so to have like just pure bodies be on objective and count as battle line, especially for some battle plans, really matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love Liberators, right? I've sung the praises of Liberators all over this edition, but they're still just 5 bodies at the end of the day, and their damage is still negligible. So, yeah, having cheap screens of crossbows, for example, really useful. Yeah. So if you bring them as coalition, they can't be the general. And again, like an ally, they don't count towards battle line, but do count towards artillery and behemoth limits. So you still have the battle line status. So if you're playing, what is it, Apex Predators, I think, the one where you specifically only battle line units count towards the objective?
Apex Predators and Power and Numbers.
Right. Yeah. So
it's not one of those two, it's not just battle line, but battle line takes preference on that one.
Power right. Yeah. So if you're playing one of those two, you still have the battle line role. You just don't count towards the minimum battle line required for the list.
Yep.
And some general notes before we start. These are going to be applicable to all the cities. We're going to go through every single city, but here are some notes for general. The Lord Arcanum on Comet Trail, it works on any Cities of Sigmar unit, right? So this will work on Stormcast in a city's army. It'll work on all the other cities' units. So it's a pretty handy ability. +1 hit and an aura. However, Aventis, his Comet Trail only works on Hammerhal units. So there's no reason at all to use Aventis outside of Hammerhal.
Yep.
I will also say that being limited to 1 in 4 units makes it really difficult to run MSU, which is multiple small units. So for example, if you wanted to bring 5 Knight Judicators in the Cities of Sigmar list, you would have to have 20 units total in the army. It's really, really difficult to do that. Usually you'll end up using 1, 2 Stormcast units, maybe 3 if you go really, really small on the other stuff.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, you can't use the Stormcast Endless spells outside of a Stormcast Allegiance. So it's like your allies, but it's like allies plus, and the plus is really important. Because you can gain access to artifacts, you can gain access to command abilities, you can gain access to all kinds of stuff. And when you combo that with the really good War Scrolls that Stormcast have, you end up with stuff way stronger, potentially, than what you can get out of the Stormcast Battle Tome. So, starting us off here with the Cities of Sigmar, we're looking at Hammerhal. So I've gone through all the cities and compiled all the information here. And I'm not going to just, talk about every single ability. I'm just going to talk about the ones that are really relevant to Stormcast, right? Like if they're command traits in general, unless they buff nearby units, we won't talk about them because you can't be the general, so Stormcast units can't take the command trait. So it has to specifically be some way to buff them. Hammerhal obviously gives you the Hammerhal keyword, which works with the Aventis Comet Trail. And Aventis, as a general in this particular sub-faction, he's the only general that you can take from Stormcast, and if you make him your general, you get 1 command point per turn. But since he's unique, you can't take a command trait, not great. I don't, if you think of the command trait as you get 1 command point per turn, that's still not a great command trait. I'd much rather use the other ones that are available.
Hammerhal actually has some neat command traits about wound reroll, so I would not give that up for.
Definitely, yeah. So the command ability, each city gives you a command ability, and the one from Hammerhal in particular is that if you are in enemy territory at the end of the combat phase, you can fight if you're within 3 inches of an enemy unit, and it's double fight with all these conditions wrapped up in it. It's like the weakest version of double fight in the game, but it's the one that Stormcast can use. So it's really, really strong. Fighting twice is nuts. But because there's all these restrictions on it, it's hard to use. You have to be in enemy territory, right? And not every battle plan has full territory. There's a neutral zone sometimes. And you also have to be within 3 inches of an enemy, which can be difficult because your opponent can play around that by pulling models out of range or if you just wipe the unit out, then there's nothing left, right? So there's restrictions on it. It's really strong if you're fighting against monsters because sometimes you'll swing low and I missed by 2 or 3 wounds and this monster is still alive. Obviously, it's still going to be within 3 inches of your unit. So at the end of the turn, you can just fight it again. But if you're fighting against really fast monsters that push into your territory, you might not get to use this, unfortunately.
I will say though, this ability is a lot more weaker than it used to be, because in AOS 2, a bunch of the battle plans were just like half the map is yours, half is theirs, and you just like deploy, 12 inches up the board edge or whatever. Nowadays, the territory in a lot of battle maps is just 11 inches from the board edge, so it's not a whole lot of area to fight in.
Yeah,
just something to consider.
It's if you know the battle plans ahead of time that you're going to be playing at the event, this could be a consideration, right? Because you might have not enough space. Your units might not be fast enough, right? Like if you're trying to get this off with fulminators, like the crazy high damage fulminators, but they're slow. They're not going to get into enemy territory reliably to activate this ability.
Yeah. Yep.
The command trait that's really cool here, that I really like for Stormcast units, is Blood of the 12, which allows you to reroll wound rolls of 1 while you're wholly within 12 inches of the general. So if you pack this on like a Phoenix, who's giving a -1 wound aura and allows your melee rolls to start rerolling 1s, that's pretty great. That's really, really great. Any kind of force multiplier on Stormcast is really strong.
Yep.
There's also a bunch of good artifacts. So one of them is the Twin Stone, which is an aura around the bearer, +1 to hit with melee weapons. So when you combine this, you're +1 hit, and you can AoA or AoD or use any other command freely because this stacks with all that. And then you also have a command trait to reroll wound rolls of 1. This is huge for Stormcast melee units. Like fulminators,
especially since we don't have Celestial Blades in this allegiance.
Yes. Yeah. The Saint's Blade is a pretty strong artifact, right? +1 rend all the time, which is good. So you could take that on like a Stardrake, you could take it on a Draconis, even a Taurolon going up to rend 2 is pretty scary. And Azuros is potentially pretty scary, like rend 2 damage on 5 attacks. It's a good artifact, and it also is +1 damage if you're within 6 inches of an objective. So think about an Azuros, just like a weak fighter, right? 5 attacks, rend 2, 3 damage. If you're fighting on an artifact, suddenly this guy's doing 15 damage every combat phase.
Ouch! Yeah, that's really good. Actually,
really good. Or
suddenly turns into a Celestant Prime.
Yeah, just out of nowhere, right? And he's also still giving you +1 hit with his lantern. Taurolon is potentially a good use for that, right? 4 attacks on rend 2, 3 damage. Draconis is now on rend 4, 3 damage. Stardrake is doing relevant damage. It's a good artifact. Yeah,
like especially I love the objective stipulation because it's like that's what you want to be doing.
Correct. Yeah.
But it could have been some useless condition, but no, like it's a good artifact.
Yeah, and it's just within 6 inches of an objective, not wholly within, which is great. Armor of Malice is +1 save always, so you can have a Stardrake on a 2-up always. It's pretty good.
Oh, damn. Yeah, that is really good.
Yep. And then there's a great spell, which is +1 to run and charge, and you get to fly. So this can go on a unit of fulminators, and you can give them +1 to run and charge and flying. And then give them reroll wound 1, and then give them +1 hit. And then if you need to give them AoD or another +1 hit, you can. Or you can, if you get them in enemy territory somehow, you can fight twice with them. These are all very, very strong abilities for our melee hammers.
Yeah, the more I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, all these, it's like an enhancement heavy book. I really want all of them.
Yes, they're fantastic. So let's talk about some units here. We talked about fulminators. They might be a bit too slow to make Hammerhal work because you really want that fight twice ability. And you'd have to bring some significant shooting to force the enemy to come to you, in which case you're not charging into enemy territory necessarily. Like Dracoths just aren't that unit that takes advantage of this. But Stormdrake Guard, on the other hand, totally have the mobility. They get to easily get into enemy territory, even on those scenarios where the enemy territory is only like 11 inches up the board or something. They can still do that. And whenever they fight, they get to use their Dragon to the Tempest ability, which is an instant kill. So you could potentially do that every time you fight, which is really good.
Oh, that's a nice combo. I hadn't thought of that. Interesting.
Another little combo here is if you're using slower units like Evocators and Paladins, you could cast a bridge and then cast Cogs, and then before you teleport that unit, give it Wings of Fire, and then it has a 7-inch charge. That's a lot of setup, but Cities of armies have pretty reliable wizards, I would say. They get +1 with any battle mage. They can bring a Hurricanum. There's all kinds of ways you can buff your casting. So it's not impossible to think you could actually make this work, where you could get a 7-inch charge on Protectors or a 7-inch charge on Evocators.
No, not at all. I think it's very doable.
It is worth noting, though, that Evocators, their Lightning Arc ability specifically says the first time this unit fights each phase, so it doesn't work with the Hammerhal command ability. This is actually the only interaction possible where this matters, so it's like they put this in just for this ability.
I remember that FAQ.
Yeah. The Stardrake is actually a great unit for this because it's fast, right? And if it gets to fight twice, it gets to use its Cavernous Jaws twice. And unlike the Dragged into the Tempest from Stormdrake, which happens after they fight, the Cavernous Jaws on the Stardrake happens after you pile in, but before you attack. So you can snipe
that's
out.
huge.
Yeah, so you can snipe out like unit leaders, anything that gives a bonus. Like if you're fighting pink horrors, you can eat the guy with the +1 save banner or musician, whichever one it is. Yeah, and he's also, if you want to give him a Twin Stone, he's got this massive base. So that 12-inch aura is huge on a Stardrake.
Wow, yeah. I really like how, in this case, if you give him the Armor of Malice, actually, I don't know, I'd probably just give him +1 to hit. Because he's always on all attack and you can spend a CP on all out defense, and yeah, that'd be a really sweet unit.
Mm-hmm. Then Saint's Blade, we talked about that. There's a lot of Stormcast units with high volume but relatively low damage who you can just pump up with this artifact. You could potentially get Karazai fighting twice, and every time you fight, that tail goes off. Like, that's so disgusting. I can't even wrap my head around it. Because every time he kills something, right, it's not the first time he kills something in a phase, it's every time he kills something in any phase, no matter what, he gets pumped up. He can heal or he can get more attacks or all kinds of stuff. So yeah, Karazai can be a real wrecking ball. You can bring all kinds of stuff to support him. You could bring battle mages to give him wild form. You could bring battle mages to give him -1 hit. You can give him Mystic Shield. You can give him all kinds of stuff. Karazai could be a wrecking ball on a Hammerhal list.
I could see that, yeah. And, supported by some cities shooting and artillery, yeah, totally.
Yeah, 14-inch fly move could probably get into enemy territory, so it could work.
Yeah.
And then the last one I really wanted to mention was Celestant Prime, because you can just drop him in enemy territory, right? Like,
yeah,
it's guaranteed.
Slightly, Yep.
Guaranteed 12-inch charge. And if you somehow get your general in range, you can get reroll 1 to wound. You can always AoE him, and yeah, then you're on 2s and 2s rerolling 1s to wound. Yeah, Celestant Prime is great in a Hammerhal list.
I think that's what people were initially just hyped when this book first came out. That was the main ally, even though he wasn't very good back then, just because of his fight twice shock value. It was really good.
Oh,
and he's just better now.
We talked about people playing safe against Celestant Prime. They play so safe against Hammerhal Celestant Prime. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So James, what do you think of this, man? Doesn't this look like this looks better than the Stormcast Allegiance, right? Just these abilities. This isn't even everything. This is just the stuff I wanted to cherry pick and discuss.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been sort of saying semi-memeingly recently that Stormcast seem better in cities than they do in Stormcast.
Yeah, oddly enough, it seems to be true. Hopefully it gets fixed. So overall, I would say, as a Stormcast delivery mechanism, if you're playing Stormcast in Hammerhal, that is great. I would rate that as an A tier. This is kind of like a made-up ranking. It doesn't mean Hammerhal is an A tier list, just like the potential for Stormcast to be good in this army is like really high. It's A tier.
Yep.
And then let's talk about the Living City, which is...
Oh, God.
If there was something higher than S tier, this Living City would be like SSS tier. It's crazy.
This thing is the Lord-Relictor of Coalition cities.
This is the Gardus. This is the Gardus of cities.
Yeah.
So let's talk about exactly what it is in case people aren't familiar. So they have 2 main abilities that combo really well together. The first one is an outflank, which is a term for... it's like shorthand. It's a term we use when you deploy a unit wholly within 6 inches of a table edge. Right, so you have that. You can put units in reserve, like Scions, and you can put them on the table more than 9 inches from an enemy, like Scions, but the restriction here is you have to be wholly within 6 inches of a table edge, which, on a smaller table, this is not a big deal. You get really good locations. On the bigger tables in 2nd edition, it was a lot worse, but now this doesn't seem too restrictive at all.
No, it's great.
And then you combine that with this command ability here, which is called Strike, Then Melt Away. And what this allows you to do is, at the end of the shooting phase, if your unit shot, you can make a normal move with it. And it doesn't specify, like you think maybe, based on the name of it, you have to retreat, like fall away, move away from enemies. No. You just make a normal move. And you can do this aggressively, moving forward into the enemy army. And they can't even redeploy, because redeploy is only usable in the movement phase. So what this allows you to do is to take Stormcast units, or any unit, but let's talk about Stormcast units, that can have like a weak shooting attack, right? Like, let's say, I don't know, fulminators, right? They might do a couple mortal wounds when they breathe on you.
A Knight Zephyros.
A Zephyros has a pistol.
Yeah.
So any of these units, you shoot, and then you make a normal move immediately. So you deploy from reserve 9 inches away. Well, more than 9 inches, right? Let's be specific.
Yeah,
here.
let's be real technical here. Yeah.
And then you shoot, and then you get to move. And if you have, at least a 6-inch move, you're looking at a 3-inch charge. But even better, let's say you have a good shooting attack, right? Like, let's say you're backed up by some shooting. You can wipe out the screen that you had to deploy in front of, and then push in past it and charge the stuff that actually matters. This is an insanely powerful ability that I would trade everything in the Stormcast book for this. Every single thing in the Stormcast book is worse than this.
I have to agree with you there. Like
moving after translocation was this good. This is on the same tier as that previous version of translocation.
Yeah, I actually have to agree. Like, I don't know what they were thinking when they made this ability. It's almost like I just have no words. It's like, how do you nerf translocation and then forget about this? It's so useful.
It's really nuts. When they first designed it, obviously it wasn't. Dracoths weren't that good. Frankly, they weren't that good, and it stayed in this form forever. Stormdrakes didn't exist. Dracoths weren't that good. There weren't many units that could really abuse this. Like, there wasn't any edge cases. But now that Dracoths are insane, and especially Fulminators doing like 1 billion damage on the charge, and Stormdrakes doing a ton as well, like adding more mobility on top of it, they combo so well with this sub-faction. It's crazy. But before we get into like a whole list of units that can use that, right? Let's talk about 2 other things that I want to highlight. The Spear of the Hunt artifact gives you +1 Rend to a melee weapon, and if you charge, you fight first. That's insane. Stormcast fighting first is nuts, because you can then double charge units, and they both get to fight before your opponent gets to fight. And it's also
this would be good on a Stormdrake.
Yes.
Yeah, it could be good on a Stormdrake.
Yep. There's also the Iron Oak Skin spell, which is -1 to wound on a friendly unit, which is fine, right? Stack that with Mystic Shield, and you can make a unit of Stormdrakes really, really tough.
Yeah. Oh, also Living Cities. Each model in the Living City army in the hero phase heals 1 every turn. So hey,
yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah, why not? So Stormcast have a ton of melee units with shooting attacks. So let's just run through the whole list here. So any Dracoth, right? Fulminators, Concussors, Tempesters, Lord Celestant, all this stuff can get in there. Lord Celestant could use this, could use Strike and Melt Away, and then charge in alongside a bunch of units with the Spear of the Hunt, and fight first and have +1 Rend. Stormdrake Guard can also do this. Now, Stormdrake Guard, you generally don't want to outflank because they can just move in the hero phase anyway. And if you're outflanking them, that means you're not trying to use outflank and strike and melt away with another unit. So, like we saw at LVO...
I mean, Stormdrake Guard just want a hero phase move, normal move, shoot, and then move. So Stormdrake Guard move 36 inches in this list is what Paul's trying to say.
Yeah. And if
they don't need outflank.
And if you have a Knight-Incantor, you can also breathe in the hero phase as well. So there's no need for Stormdrake Guard to do this, even though they can.
Yeah.
Vigilors, interestingly, can do this, right? They can shoot, and then they can move in for a closer charge if you want to get them in melee. Chariots can do this if you want to get... This is the only reason to give a bow on the chariot. I sometimes forget the bow exists, but, sometimes you want to get your chariot closer in. I don't know if it's that worth using a command ability just on that, but you can.
Oh my god.
Hunters and Paladors can do some really wonky stuff with this, because you can teleport at the start of the movement phase, then shoot, and then move after shooting, which means you can just use them to steal objectives.
Yes, I was going to say that. It's like how their teleport works is actually really functional, because they have a self-teleport. It's on their war scroll, not in the allegiance. So
Yep. Prosecutors can do similar things, 12-inch fly move, and then you shoot, and then another 12-inch fly move, and then you charge with 3d6. That's a ton of distance.
Yeah, good lord.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Andrasta can do something like this. She's got a 12-inch fly move and a spear, right? So you can get her in. Lord Aquilor can teleport and do the same shenanigans the other guys can. Lord Imperator has a shooting attack that some people forget exists,
Let's not talk about... I didn't ask for to be attacked on this channel.
The Knight Zephyros is not bad, right? Like, if you can teleport and then get that hero on an objective. Knight Draconis can shoot his breath and then use that, which will allow him to keep up with Stormdrake Guard fairly reliably. Normally, Knight Draconis just falls behind. Lord Celestant, if people forget, but the Lord Celestant's hammer cloak is now a missile weapon, so you could shoot him into play, and he is not a bad melee fighter.
Not at all.
The Knight-Judicator can do it, and the Knight-Venator. So all of these guys can shoot and then just skedaddle. Now, Karazai's base is too big. That's I can't believe we figured that out one day, that you have to be wholly within 6 inches of a table edge, and his base is 6.2 inches. So Karazai can't use outflank, and he can't use this combo, but you can just run him up the center of the board. Like, it's not a big deal. An extra 14-inch fly move is fine. Now, it is also worth noting, Celestant Prime does not actually shoot, so he can't use Strike then Melt Away because his is just an ability. It's not a weapon that he's using to make shooting attacks. It's just an ability that happens in the shooting phase. So that's an exhaustive list of units that can use this ability. I didn't mention the Stormdrake because he's worth talking about on his own, because the Stormdrake with the Spear of the Hunt is actually pretty sick. Like, charging in with a Rend 3 damage hammer alongside a shooting unit that moved in the movement phase and then charged in. That's a lot of damage. Really a lot of damage. Because the Stormdrake can clear out the screen, and then Fulminators push in past that, or Drakes, or whatever you're using. Right? It's so gross. And then
the more I think about this ability, it's like, oh my god.
Yeah. It's so nuts.
Man.
Yeah.
So nuts.
Another thing I wanted to talk about here is, once people start adapting to this kind of hyper-aggressive, hyper-mobile strategy, they're going to start using wave after wave of screens. So one thing you could potentially do is you got Krondys, old reliable Krondys, casting Bridge at +4 for the Iron Drakes to teleport across, shoot down screens, and get your stuff where it needs to be. So, yeah, Living City is absurdly good. It's translocation before the errata good. It's so good. And I can't believe more people aren't talking about it.
I think it might be nerfed, either to not affect Stormcast Eternals. The way I can see them going about this is either they will do the wiser thing, which is just nerf this ability to not work on Stormcast, or they will do the opposite thing, which is change the Drakot and Stormdrake Guard and all the stupid breath attacks to be like abilities and not shooting attacks.
They'd have to go through every single one, because you can always think of some good combo with that.
Yeah, but it's like if people's problems is that the breath is causing way too much damage because it also unleash hell. You can also unleash hell with it. They might just go ahead and are out of that in the next Balance Spore Scroll, which is every 3 months actually, not 6 months. The 6 months is the points changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. We will see what they do with this.
I hope they fix this. I don't want to face this in any tournament. I'm sorry. Like, if you're going to FAQ translocation because it's an unfun experience to play against, this cannot be balanced to play against. Nobody wants to play against this.
I agree with you. It's really strong if we're going down that road, Yeah. Right, S tier. Easy. Living City is easily S tier for Stormcast units. Let's talk about Greywater Fastness. So Greywater Fastness is more shooting focused. The other two we talked about are more melee focused. But let's talk about some cool abilities they have. So you get a command trait here. Units wholly within 12 inches of the general can reroll hit 1 with missile weapons. So it's like a better version of Divine Light if you're using any kind of Stormcast shooting. Any shooting in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's another command trait you can take instead if you want to be more aggressive, which is friendly units wholly within 12 inches can run and shoot. They can't charge, but they can run and shoot, which is interesting. It's an interesting enough ability that it's worth talking about. I think the reroll hit 1 is better, but this one's pretty cool too.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have the Runic Munitions Artifact, which adds 1 to the damage of a missile weapon specifically, which is really cool. And the Macroscope Artifact, which gives you +1 CP and +1 to hit with missile weapons.
Wait a second. Stormdrake with Runic Munitions? Does that work?
Yes. No, sorry. No. Because it's a mount weapon. It won't work. I actually have a note about that at the bottom there, you can see. Stormdrake cannot use artifacts on Reign of Stars since it is a mount weapon.
Ouch. Yeah. So Knight-Judicator then, I guess.
Knight-Judicator and the Venator, I guess.
Venator has 1 damage on his bow. Why would I ever do that? So it's like, no.
Now you're doubling it. Think of the efficiency.
Okay.
So this obviously, my thoughts go towards like a Toralon gun castle build, right? Where you can use Judicators, you can use Tempesters if you want a more aggressive kind of thing. You can go with Vanguard Raptors with long strikes. You can reinforce them, and now they're rerolling 1s. They're very fragile, so I don't know if that's the best list, but yeah, rerolling 1s and +1 hit all the time, stupid efficient. I love it. Because how many times do you roll 1s with Stormcast shooting? It's the worst feeling.
Oh god, happened in my last game. Happened in the semis.
Yeah. Knight-Judicator with the runic munitions can do 4 damage per shot, so he's just potentially doing 8 damage per shot. If you have that with Duralia, those 2 alone can do a ton of damage. You can also give the Knight-Judicator a macroscope, right? So now he's on 2s and 2s all the time, and he doesn't need any kind of +1 hit effect like all-out attack. And yeah, this is fine, right? Like this is as far as coalition go, this is where I'd want all of them to land, right? Like fine.
Yeah, this is like fun, a little bit strong, but not like absurdly busted or anything.
Yeah, this is more reasonable after the previous 2, and not even Hammerhal. Hammerhal's not that bad, but Living City is busted. This is fine. This is a nice little palate cleanser before we move into the other really busted ones.
Go for it.
But first, let's talk about the Phoenicium. So Phoenicium is all about Phoenixes and Phoenix Guard, right? So it's about sacrificing guys, fighting on death. There's a lot of cool thematic stuff going on here, and I think the rules reflect it really well. So first off, the ability that you get is you get +1 to hit and +1 to wound with melee weapons if a Phoenicium unit was destroyed in that phase. So obviously it's only in the combat phase, but maybe you have some kind of charge phase fight ability and you get unleashed, and I don't know. It could come up, but it's not restricted to combat phase, but it's pretty much the combat phase. Now, what's cool about this is that there's no range from the unit that was destroyed. It's a table-wide effect. So if one unit in the corner of the map died in that combat phase, everything else on the table has +1/+1. Which is neat.
Oh, God. Wow, it's really neat. Yeah.
The command ability combos pretty well with this. Models slain within 12 inches of a Phoenix can fight before getting removed. Now, this is activated and received by the Phoenix, so other units can still get their own commands, which is great. And unfortunately, it doesn't combo with Cycle the Storm because Cycle stops a unit from being slain, so there's no doubling up here because that would have been just the best.
Oh, yeah. That really would have been.
Yeah. And unfortunately, before you remove the model, so a unit is counted as destroyed when all the models are slain and removed. And if you're using living idols to fight, you haven't been destroyed yet, right? The model is slain, the unit is not yet destroyed, so you have to wait until another unit is destroyed so that you can get Vengeful Revenants. So a little bit of anti-synergy there, but if a unit dies, it gets to fight, and then everything else gets +1/+1. Pretty good. And this is an aura around the Phoenix, right? It's not just one unit around the Phoenix, it's any unit around the Phoenix in any combat phase. So if you're getting aggressively attacked, you can do a lot of damage on return, right? Picture like Hallowed Knights fighting on a 4-up with Redeemers. This is guaranteed, and it's any unit.
Wow. Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad at all.
There's some interesting artifacts here. Amber Armor lets you ignore Rend 1, which on our... it just straight up says if it's Rend 1, you just ignore it. Like, Rend 2 still works, Rend 3 works fine. Rend 1, you just ignore. But there's a lot of Rend 1 in the game. And when you have safe stacking heroes in Stormcast, like, for example, Stormdrake, that's a pretty good artifact.
Yeah. I'd consider putting that on a Stormdrake or even a Lord Celestant, like a Lord Celestant on Drakon or something.
Yep, make some tanky, save stack on him, and then just tank things for days. Another artifact worth mentioning is the Phoenix Pinion, which allows the bearer to fly, and you can run and charge, but not shoot. So this one has a lot of interesting applications. Being able to run and charge, especially with guaranteed run 6, it's basically +6 inches to any hero that you want, and then you can still charge. Really, really strong mobility. So let's look at some Stormcast units. Obviously, the core of this is you have a Phoenix. It's probably going to be a Frost Phoenix. It's probably going to be reducing everything's wound rolls by 1, and then you're going to be at +1/+1 and fighting on death. Right? That's the core of this army. You can bring some Phoenix Guard as your battle line, and then you can fill with hammers and shooting, and you have a pretty solid list. So when you fight twice with Living Idols, my mind goes to Fulminators and Stormdrakes immediately. Right? +1/+1 and fighting on death is really, really good, because if you charge and they hit you, like if they riposte and kill you in that same phase, you still have your charge bonus active.
Oh, wow. Did not consider that.
Yeah, so your Fulminators would be on potentially 2s and 2s, Rend 2/3 damage, 5 attacks apiece, and then the mounts as well. Pretty good. Pretty dang good. Because that's typically how you deal with it, right? Is when you have a fast melee unit, you absorb it and then you counterattack. And you want to do as much damage as quickly as possible in this game because you never know when they're going to get a double turn. But when they're fighting on death, that changes up the math pretty significantly.
Oh yeah, I'm actually. This isn't a bad city at all. I'd almost put this at B. Good lord, if it wasn't so like Phoenix Temple focused, if you could like take other things and have them be valuable, yeah.
Well, you can, right? It's just you really want a Phoenix because there's all these kinds of abilities that give Phoenixes more wounds and all this stuff.
Phoenixes are a great unit. Like
they're great.
the Frost Phoenix is an amazing unit. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have one of them, you might as well take at least one block of Phoenix Guard. They're battle line, they're durable, they're a great anvil. Slow as all hell, but very durable, and they don't hit that bad.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So weird interactions with the rules that I want to clarify here. If you're using Stormdrake Guard with this, they do not trigger Dragged into the Tempest, I think, because Dragged to the Tempest says after this unit fights, whereas Stormdrake Guard models die and the model fights. So there's that slight difference, which means you don't get to trigger the Dragged into the Tempest ability.
For each dead model, yeah.
Yeah, because Living Idols says models can fight immediately, whereas Dragged into the Tempest says after the unit fights. A model fighting is different than the unit fighting. Whereas a Stardrake is just one model, and that is the unit. It would get to trigger Cavernous Jaws every time you get to do that. So if for some reason your Stardrake does get killed, you can trigger Cavernous Jaws when you fight and pile in twice, which is cool. I don't see Phoenix Stardrake lists taking off, but it does seem like a fun interaction. So Stormcast have a bunch of cheap disposable units. Like Cities has a lot, but there's Gryph-hounds, there's Aetherwings, there's a few things we can throw in there to try to force Vengeful Revenants to trigger in order to get that +1/+1, and that's kind of fun. And fighting on death is really strong with units like Fulminators and Grandhammers, like I said. Grandhammers probably not usable without Scions of the Storm, but definitely Fulminators, Tempesters even can do a lot of damage in melee if you fight them. So strong ability. But there's a lot of limitations, right? It does nothing for shooting. When you bring a Phoenix, you're incentivized to bring Phoenix Guard, and then you're incentivized to bring a big hammer unit of Stormcast. You run into a lot of problems with list building, and you just never get the pieces quite right. And usually what you end up with is either you're just using Stormdrake Guard, which other cities can use better, or you have like a really slow melee army, because there's almost nothing for mobility in here, right? So you have this like brick that's moving up, and that's really good if you're fighting against another army that doesn't have any shooting and is also kind of slow. There's other ways to get +1 hit. It's not a super unique effect. So overall, I think I would rank this as C tier, maybe B tier. Like it's somewhere between that, right? Like I think Greywater Fastness.
I think it'd be a low B, high C. That's how I say it.
Yeah, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It focuses only on melee units, and there's other cities that just do melee units better. Right, both Living City and Hammerhal are the gold standard for melee units. But fun, and if you have a Phoenix, this is a good excuse to use it. All right, into the second half. Anvilgard. Anvilgard has this thing called illicit dealings, where there's a bunch of them, but the only ones that really matter for Stormcast units are you get an extra artifact, which is questionable because the artifacts aren't great, and you can get D3 command points, which is okay, I guess. You can take a command trait where you get 2 dealings instead of 1, so you can take both of those. There's a 5-up ward artifact, which, Amulet of Destiny was really good before it got nerfed. Here's an Amulet of Destiny. So potentially stick that on a Stardrake, and you have yourself a pretty tanky unit. But I would say the best thing about Anvilgard is Vitriolic Spray. It's a save, it's a spell, it's really hard to cast, it's a cast value of 8, and has a super low range, 6 inches. But what it does is it changes the enemy's save characteristic to just blank.
Which means all out defense will put him on a 6, but doesn't really matter.
Yeah, because you're going to have at least rend, right? This is an insanely powerful spell, right? This has always been the best thing about Anvilgard. And what people will do is they'll cast a spell portal, and then they'll try to hit something, and then they'll try to shoot it down. Mm-hmm. Right, and you can do that with Krondus very reliably because he casts base +3, and with the spell portal he's got another +1. Or sorry, when casting endless spells he's +1. So yeah, he casts the spell portal at +4, and then the spray at +3, and then his own spell, which can do all kinds of wonky stuff, at another +3. So that could be fun. I couldn't really think of many other uses for Stormcast units in an Anvilgard army. So much of the stuff is based off the curses that you give to your Hydras and whatnot. There's not a lot of potential here for Stormcast.
Was Curses part of Anvilgard? I thought that was part of Misthaven.
No, Misthaven has the narcotics. This has the Drake blood curses.
Yeah.
So
they're not that good. It's fine.
No, they're not good buffs on units that aren't good to begin with. Unfortunately. So Anvilgard, D tier, cool logo though. I really like that.
Reminds me a lot of House Greyjoy.
Next up is Hallowheart. Hallowheart is really, really strong, but it's also really complicated. So let's get into it. Gives you it's all spell focused, right? This is the spell casting sub faction. So right off the bat, all your units in your army, everywhere, ignore spells on a 5-up, which is great. That's a very strong effect. If you've seen Stormdrake Guard in action, you know that ignoring spells is, as a free thing that you're doing, it's pretty good. All wizards in a Hallowheart army cast an extra spell each turn, and they get to learn 2 spells from the lore instead of just 1. Amazing. That's such a strong ability. Unbelievably good.
It's like an enhancement for free. It's great.
It's an arcane tome on every. It's better than an arcane tome on every wizard because you also get to learn 2 spells, right? It's so good. Yeah. And that you could have that, and you'd already have like an A tier sub faction. But what props them up is this command ability here. It's at the start of your hero phase. You pick one of your wizards, and you deal D6 mortal wounds to that wizard. And then whatever the number of mortal wounds you dealt to them. So if you did 4 mortal wounds, for example. All other wizards within 12 inches add that much to their casting.
Insane. So
minimum +1 to cast for all wizards within 12 inches. And potentially +6. Unreal. Now, if you ignore those wounds, it doesn't work, right? So if you take 6 mortal wounds and you negate 2 of them with a ward or something, you'd only get +4. Just to clarify that. But yeah, that's an insanely strong ability. In a faction that already wants a lot of wizards, you get like the best casting in the game, I think. They also have a really cool artifact, which is like the Arcane Tome, but a little bit worse. You get all those spells. I would rather just take an Arcane Tome and cast another one, because you're going to learn enough already.
Yeah, I don't think they have that. They have only like 5 spells, so it's fine. You don't need to...
They have 6. They have 6. I've listed the 5 good ones here. And this is what makes this subfaction good, right? Because if you're just casting spells and they suck, it doesn't matter how many you cast, right? Like, it doesn't matter that you have +6 and, I get Mystic Shield on a +6. Like, okay, great.
Who cares?
But these are good spells, right? So let's talk about them. Roaming Wildfire, cast on a 6. It does D3 mortal wounds to a unit within 18, and then it bounces to nearby units on a 4-up to deal D3 to them as well. It's a better version of Chain Lightning, straight up. Ouch. Chain Lightning bounces and does 1. This bounces and does D3. Really strong. Seer Wounds.
I hate to break it to you. Yep. There is actually another Chain Lightning, which is on the Battle Mage's War Scroll.
Yes.
Even that one does D3.
Yes, so you can use both. Actually, they might have the same. Wow. They might have the same name. I gotta look that up. But so Seer Wounds, cast on a 6, which is very easy in this army. Heal D6. So after you hit yourself with Arcane Channeling, you can then just heal the wounds back up. On average, you'll heal the same amount that you deal to yourself.
Yep.
Elemental Cyclone is an anti-horde spell, and it's a really good one. 1 dice per model, and 4-up is immortal.
God, I would have loved that against the zombies.
Yes, 30 mortal wounds. Here you go. Crystal Aegis, if you ever play against Be'lakor or Seraphon, you can add 1 to your Eldritch Attunement, which is your 5-up spell ignore. Now your whole army's on a 4-up spell ignore. Unbelievably strong in some matchups. And then it also has Ignite Weapons, which is +1 to wound rolls for melee and ranged attacks. So you can stick this on a big squad of Iron Drakes, or you can stick it on a bunch of Fulminators, or you can stick it on Krondys. Anything +1 to wound. It's really strong.
Celestial Blades, basically. It's melee and ranged. Oh, geez.
Yes.
Oh, good lord.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's Celestial Blades, but also ranged. So if you want crossbows on 2s and 2s, this is the faction to do it.
Oh my god, that's really good.
Yeah. So just wanted to talk about some quick Stormcast unit combos here. We're big fans of the Torlon. Obviously, it's the best model ever and the best War Scroll ever. And now it casts 2 spells per turn. And you can make it cast 3 spells per turn with an Arcane Tome. Pretty good. Krondys casting 3 spells a turn. 18 wounds and a huge base, really good for arcane channeling because you can fit a lot of wizards within 12 inches of him very easily, and then you can just heal him back up with Seer Wounds. And Krondys reliably casting, minimum +4, sometimes +9 to cast, right?
So Blazing Tempest just goes off basically.
It just casts, right?
Yeah. Unless you roll a double one, but that's the only part.
Yeah, so that's great. I think that makes him the most reliable caster in the game, probably.
Yeah.
Also worth mentioning is that evocators can benefit from arcane channeling because it doesn't specify that wizard heroes get it. It's just wizards, right? So you have to pick a wizard hero to take the mortal wounds, but then all wizards get it. So evocators, if you're using them in this list, would be able to cast Empower with a +d6.
That's really so.
Yeah. I thought about using a Stardrake with an Arcane Tome, casting 2 spells with his +1/-1 casting aura. That's pretty dang good. Any melee or shooting hammer that wounds on a 3. Judicators, Fulminators, Iron Drakes are really good. There's so many units that wound on 3s that really want that +1 to wound, and then they can AoA to get +1 hit, and then they're on 2s and 2s for the most part. And then one last gross thing is that Stormdrake Guard, their ability to ignore spells on a 4-up, will stack with Eldritch Attunement, so you can potentially have 2 4-up dice rolls to ignore spells. Which is really dumb.
God. Oh my god, I would hate to be Nagashlis going into that.
Or Be'lakor, or Teclis.
Yeah.
Like, just the worst. And what's great about this is you only need 3 or 4 wizard heroes. You don't need to bring 6. You're really tempted to bring as many as possible, but because each of your wizards learns 2 spells, and that includes unique guys, so Krondys can learn 2 spells as well. You're casting a lot of your spells very reliably. You don't actually need to spam wizards with this. You can easily get 3 or 4, cover all your spells, and still have tech stuff like Crystal Aegis, just in case you face off against another wizard list.
Yeah, totally.
So this is fantastic, right? This fixes all the problems with Stormcast wizards, which are we don't cast enough spells, we don't cast them reliably. Our spells aren't very good either. So this has everything, right? And so you start taking this stuff together with good hammer units, you've got a good list. The Hallowheart is S tier, not as high S tier as Living City, but it's very, very good.
It's solid S tier, not the busted S tier.
Yeah, not triple S styling tier. It's just.
That's the better one.
Yeah. So if you're looking for an excuse to play Dracolines, here it is. Take them in this army, and you'll have a great time. And then we go to Misthavn, which oh boy. Narcotics are the thing that Misthavn does, which is it's an ability, not an enhancement. It's just an ability that you use. It's used in the hero phase, and it lasts until your next hero phase. It's kind of like a heroic action. I think maybe they were kind of toying with the concept of heroic actions when they designed this. But there's all kinds of effects. A lot of them are just heal D3 or something minor, but the big ones I'd say are +1 to hit, Ethereal, which is really interesting, to give any unit Ethereal, or any hero, or you can add 1 to casting, unbinding, and dispelling. So these are not enhancements, which means you can give them to unique units like Celestant Prime, Krondys, Karazai, and so on. Which is very, very interesting. So you could have an ethereal Celestant Prime. You can have an ethereal Karazai in the middle of the enemy army, 3-up, ignoring all rend. You could give Krondys another +1 to cast, so he's on +5 with a bridge, or just +4 with his Blazing Tempest. There's some interesting things. Unfortunately, that's it. There's nothing else in this allegiance that I found that had any value at Stormcast units. And most Stormcast units, the good ones are hammer units, not our support heroes, not our unique heroes. It's all about the hammer units and buffing those up crazy high. Hallowheart's the exception because it makes wizards so good that you can't ignore them. Misthavn just doesn't do the same thing.
I think it was just added as a sort of a less flashy Anvilgard. Yeah, I don't think they were ever really that good.
From a fluff perspective, it's awesome. I love the concept
Yeah.
that there's this like shady place where you can go Celestant Prime goes to get his rocks off. Like that sounds like Karazai busts in through the roof of some shady tavern, picks up some white powder, gives it a quick, and then he's off to battle, right? Like that sounds awesome.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, I think it might have been like a beta test or like a template, which I'm okay with, like because this was introduced in like a campaign book. If they introduce cities like this for a campaign book where they're testing out mechanics, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and like they tested out the mechanics for command abilities with the Osiarch Bone Reaper's Battle Tome.
I know. That's a tragedy. Can't believe Nighthaunt are getting a tome before, but whatever.
It's gonna be sick, man. James, you gonna start a Nighthaunt army? Like build it up proper?
Army? No, not anytime soon.
Oh, still going with your Bellacore stuff?
I feel like there's a lot of models you can buy cheap right now because nobody plays Nighthaunt really.
Well, I just sold my half of Soul Wars, so.
Oof.
Oof. That goes in the Big Oof channel.
Yeah.
One of us is gonna have to start it, right? We need battle report armies.
Yes.
So next up, Settlers Gain. Settlers Gain is the Lumineth City of Sigmar, and you can use 1 in 4 Lumineth units like you can with Stormcast, and that's about all the good things I can find with this one. Unfortunately for Stormcast units, it doesn't offer much. There is the Heartstone artifact, which is a 4-up revive when you're slain, which I think is pretty cool if you have like a Phoenix, and you can give a Frost Phoenix this. But as for giving it to Stormcast, a 4-up revive is just not worth a whole subfaction. There's another artifact to give you +2 attacks, so you could have a Knight Draconis with 7 attacks, right? That's pretty cool.
It's all right. It's nothing.
Yeah. There's like a 6-up ward artifact. There's like okay things. It's not great by any means. I think maybe they were worried about making it like too strong because you can use Lumineth, and Lumineth have strong rules, so maybe that's what they thought. But
yeah, they became a little too overly careful because they were like, oh, we don't want Lumineth and Stormcast combining together to form some hideous monstrosity, so the allegiance abilities are fairly weak.
Yeah, and you know what? That's fine. Just the fact that there's an option to use Stormcast and Lumineth in a city, I think that's already cool enough. Not everything needs to be like top tier competitive.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, F tier, unfortunately. Excelsis was featured in Broken Realms. It's heavily featured in the story right now. It's the home of the Knights Excelsior.
Paladins.
And
yep.
I was always interested in it because take a look at this picture here. It doesn't have like a factions symbol yet, that at least one that I could find in time for the video. But there's this huge just chunk of the old world. Like that's a piece of the old world just embedded into the ground or into the bay. And every time, this is the coolest story of all the cities, so I'm going to talk about it for a bit. But every time you like go near it, you start having visions. So people have been mining this thing and taking these like little rocks and having minor visions all the time, constantly. It's like the whole economy in this area revolves around having visions, which is pretty.
Visions of what? Like your old life,
the future,
old world life,
visions of the future.
Oh wow.
Yeah, prophetic visions, right? And so it's reflected really well in the rules. So you can once per phase, when you shoot or fight with a unit in this army, you can roll a dice. If you roll a 2-up, you get a +1 to hit. But if you roll a 1, you get -1 to hit.
I like that.
Yeah, so that is not a command ability. It can't be roared. It stacks with command abilities, right? So if you have another command, you can use it with that. It works in every single phase, including if you have some kind of hero phase shooting or Unleash Hell, right? And if you fail the Unleash Hell roll, well, you're already going to have -1, so what's the difference? There's no downside.
Yeah, there's no downside to it, yeah.
Yeah, you can offset the penalty with other kinds of effects, right? There's always all-out attack. There's Comet Trail from the Toralon. There's the Celestial Hurricanum. There's all kinds of +1 hit effects. So the -1 hit, really not a big deal. This is basically just a free +1 hit on every time you fight or shoot once per phase.
Yeah, I like it. It's neat.
Yeah. There is a command ability here. Riposte, a save roll of 6 causes a mortal wound back in combat, which is Azerite Halo, basically, as a command ability.
Yep.
Which isn't great, because if you're using this command ability, that means you can't use all-out defense. So you have to choose to potentially do mortal wounds on the save or have +1 to save, which isn't a great choice, because you're always going to pick +1 to save. It's better to survive than it is to do a small amount of mortal wounds back.
Yeah, I think this is one of those designed with second edition in mind command abilities.
Definitely, yeah. Because you could, re-roll save rolls of 1 back then. There is a cool command trait here, which is Bastion's ability, basically. You can redeploy D3 units at the start of the first round, which is strong, right? Bastion's ability is strong. The thing is, without long strikes and their long range and the ability to shoot in the hero phase, this isn't that strong, right? Like, what makes Bastion's ability quite good in a Stormcast army is the fact that it combos with long strikes.
And Thunderbolt Volley, yep.
And volley, yeah. So this is okay, right? Like, you might be able to sneak some drakes onto a weak flank or something. It's okay, I guess. There's an artifact here, the Glimmering, and that's basically the Luckstone. So guaranteed 12-inch charge or whatever, hit, wound roll, whatever. That's a strong ability, no doubt about that. But it's not as strong if you don't have reserve deployment from Scions, right? What makes Luckstone decent is that you can Scions into play and then guarantee a 12-inch charge.
Yep. So -1 to hit in melee and in shooting though. That I quite like that actually.
Yeah, the Griffeather Charm was one of the best artifacts in second edition. If you recall, when Malign Sorcerer came out, this artifact was included, and it was just -1 to be hit all the time and +1-inch move. And it was good. It was very good. People used it all the time.
I think it's I mean, now having to necessitate all out attack for when your thing gets attacked, it's really good.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. Like, you'd have to roar something and then use this artifact. Like, -1 hit effects just aren't as good as they used to be, unfortunately.
Yeah.
In trying to think,
I mean, at the very least, you make them spend the CP. You're like taxing their resources, so they're not spending CP on necessarily everything else. It's like I think of it as a weird way. Like, if an Iron Jaws player has 2 CP, are they going to use it on all-out defense or redeploy Battle Shock, or are they going to save it for all-out attack? So it's sort of one of those weird abilities. It's a niche thing.
Yeah. So trying to think of Stormcast unit combos, there's nothing really that stood out to me. These are like fine bonuses. Like, +1 hit doesn't particularly favor any of our units in any exciting way, right? Stormcast already have lots of ways to get +1 hit. Every unit could get +1 hit. So this is just a fine mix of abilities. Nothing too strong. Nothing really stands out too much.
That's more like if you want to make a fluffy Excelsis with some Knights Excelsior Paladins in there, go for it. It's not a bad city.
Yeah, ironically, it doesn't do anything to help Knights Excelsior Paladins. Their main problem is speed, and this doesn't do anything for that, so unfortunate. And then let's talk about the Tempest Eye. So we talked about this briefly in Lords of the Storm just a couple weeks ago. But Tempest Eye is very, very strong, right? Right off the bat, in the first round, you get +3-inch move and +1 to save rolls for the whole round. And this isn't like an ability that has to be activated. This is just everywhere, no command point spent. If your opponent is attacking you in the first round, you have +1 to save, and on your turn, you have +3-inch move, which is great. Really, really great. And this stacks with all-out defense. It stacks with Finest Hour. Like, it makes it really, really hard to lose any key pieces in turn 1. This is the, like, if you're in a Alpha Strike meta, this is the counter to it. It's so strong.
Oh yeah. Or you can also Alpha Strike with this, like 17-inch moving, like 15-inch Stormdrakes and like 17-inch Karazai.
Definitely. There's also +1 to run always, which works really well with the command ability, which is you can shoot even if you ran. Right now, because that command ability works in the shooting phase, you can't all-out attack with it. So think of it like advancing in 40k. You can shoot at -1 basically.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, if you're running Dracots and Drakes,
yeah, it doesn't matter.
+3, so +4 to my run roll because I'm +3 to move, right?
Yep.
So effectively a +4 on my movement. Plus I get to shoot after I run. Oh,
and
wonderful.
D6, right? So
and yeah.
So 5 to 11 or 5 to 10, right? Extra inches.
Yeah.
And then you get to charge. Or sorry, no, just run and shoot. Just run and shoot, not charge.
Run and shoot. Yeah, it's not charge, yeah.
There's a command trait here, +1 to charge while you're near the general. And there's another command trait. You can't have both, right? You can only have one command trait, but +1 to wound with missile weapons, which is very, very, very good. +1 to wound with missile weapons as a command trait, not a spell, not a command ability. That is a very strong effect.
Yeah, we were just talking about ballistas, like rapid fire ballistas with always winning on 2s next to a Lord-Ordinator. This list wouldn't be too bad, actually.
Yeah, and the +3-inch move actually lets them get into a somewhat decent position.
Yeah, because he has 7-inch movement. Yeah.
Yep. You've got an artifact here to reroll charge rolls, so you can take this with the command trait for +1, and you can have some pretty reliable charges. And the main reason, like, there's the +3-inch and +1 save is really good, but the second reason you want to use Tempest Eye is the Aura of Glory spell. This gives it's an aura effect around the caster. It adds 1 to the characteristic of attacks of melee weapons while they're near you, which is just an insane. Like, Unleash Thy Hatred on Paladins in Stormcast is an insane effect, right? Like, that's strong enough that we consider it as a viable. Like, it makes Paladins and Protectors just good. Just give this to every unit. Right, every unit, every turn has +1 attack for their melee weapons. Fulminators, 6 attacks with the glaives, 4 attacks with the mounts, each.
Ugh.
Right? So good.
Oh my god. So disgusting.
Yeah, Protectors doing the Unleash Thy Hatred bomb every single turn with Star Soul Maces. It's great. It's such a strong thing. Yeah. So let's talk about some Stormcast unit combos here. So again, shooting units that want to wound on 3s, you've got Judicators, Tempesters, Rapid Fire Ballista. Anything that is wounding on a 3 can get a lot of value out of the Hawkeye command trait. Units with multiple melee weapons get a lot of value out of Aura of Glory. So we're talking Stormdrakes, the Knight Draconis, Dracoths, right? Stardrakes, Dracolines, Chariots, Karazai, Torlon. All these things just get a ton of attacks in this army. I quite like Tempesters because they can take advantage of the Hawkeye and they can take advantage of the Aura of Glory. Tempesters turn into pretty good melee attackers because they have 2 attacks apiece or 2 different melee profiles.
So wait, this affects mounts too?
Oh yeah, Jesus. It's a spell, so it affects everything.
Oh, all right. Well, great.
Stormdrakes are very good in this, right? Because +3-inch move, like you said, so they instead of a 12-inch fly move, they now have a 15-inch fly move, and that affects their hero phase move as well as their normal move. So +6-inch move in the first turn. Fulminators in particular love having +3-inch moves. It's like that extra little bit of mobility they need to get a reliable turn 1 charge. Right? We talk about this when we talk about Steadfast March. Sometimes like an extra D6 is all you need with that unit.
I know, like giving Dracoths any bit of mobility is a winner in my book. Like, I really wanted to run them this past LVO, but in my opinion, I just needed battle mages and they were too slow. If this is solving that problem, you should take Dracoths in Tempest Eye.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Protectors with Star Soul Maces love Aura of Glory, like I said, but they also really like +3-inch move on the first turn to get them into a good position because you can run 6 with them, right? And then they also like +1 charge. Any mobility on Protectors is really good.
Man, I'm gonna go to GW.com and start ordering myself a city.
Stardrake with an Arcane Tome can teach himself Aura of Glory and then cast it with a +1. And then Stardrake, if you recall, has like 4 different melee weapon profiles. And then he's got a huge base.
That'd be so good. Yes.
Krondus is also another really good wizard for casting Aura of Glory because he's got 3 different melee profiles and he casts with a +3. Yeah. So
it actually puts him a little bit comparable to his brother because that's what his brother has on it: more rend and more attacks. If you can bump Krondus' attacks up, oh god, yeah, he's pretty comparable to his brother then.
Yep, and he's also doing other stuff at the same time.
Yep.
So yeah, Tempest Eye is a very strong subfaction. I'm very impressed with it. I was really excited in Lords of the Storm past couple weeks when you got somebody who submitted one. I was like, I was writing the script for this one when we got that submission, and I was so stoked to talk about it. Tempest Eye is very strong. You can also use Caradron 1 and 4. So if you wanted to use like a bunch of gunships, right, you can use the Hawkeye command trait. You can have ballistas with an Ordinator and the General sitting nearby. All of that's on 2s and 2s now. So you got these Ren 2 D6 shots coming at you. Yeah, it's not bad. So here's a summary of where we went with all of these. So again, this is not like the power of this sub-faction. This is where we think the potential for Stormcast are in each of these sub-factions. So the top ones, like we said, Living City, Hallowheart, Tempest Eye. I don't think there's any debate about those ones. They're definitely clearly better than all of the other ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hammerhal, I'd say, is then a little bit better than Greywater, which is, just a little bit better than Phoenicium. And then all of those are better than Excelsis, Anvilgard, Misthavn, and Settlers Game, which are just, they don't offer much for Stormcast. They might be fine sub-factions in their own right. They just, as a Stormcast delivery mechanism, they're just not great.
Yeah, I fully agree with this. I would say Phoenicium could maybe be like we said, like a high C, a low B, so somewhere between that. But yeah, if you're planning on building a cities army, definitely consider. I would say, okay, let's be real. Living cities are gonna get nerfed, so Hallowheart and Tempest Eye are still really, really good. I expect most people, if they're playing Cities of Sigmar, to switch to Tempest Eye, especially considering Stormdrake Guard are still going to remain coalition units in that sub-faction, and still damn good in that sub-faction.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they're going to be very strong units. I'm looking forward to Hallowheart shenanigans. I love wizards, and it's very disappointing that Stormcast wizards are lackluster, let's say. So I'm
mediocre.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be like a big commitment. Like if we have big Stormcast armies, it wouldn't be a huge monetary commitment to get a couple boxes of battle line units. And
no,
whatever.
Because we all have hammer units. Just get some battle line, some support heroes. I think you could reasonably build a coalition Stormcast cities army for less than $200-$300.
Yeah, wouldn't be a big deal. Maybe you can find a second hand, right? I think.
Tons.
Yeah, I'm really glad they didn't put out the new battle tome for this army yet, because I was really worried back in December when we kept delaying this video that they would have released the Dawnbringer Crusades. Some like wild card, here you go, it's March, here's a new battle tome for this army. And after seeing the roadmap...
Do you know the rumors? Do you know the rumors?
Which rumors?
So the roadmap that they posted, the two things at the end, they're Skaven and Sylvaneth, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Dawnbringer Crusades is due Q4 this year.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, production issues pending, but it is due this year, at the end of this year.
We'll see. I guess we'll have 8 or 9 months to have some fun with these abilities then.
Honestly, I don't expect them to change much other than some of the insane command abilities. Like, it'd be okay if I think it'd still be okay. I think it'd still be good. Like, if you're a Stormcast player, highly consider getting a cities army because it's not that much of a monetary investment. Or it won't be, at least, when the new units finally come out.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cool stuff you can get in there. A lot of utility pieces like Duralia, crossbows, Iron Drakes, the bridge, Phoenix Guard, Phoenixes, Celestial Hurricanum.
Just give me a new War Altar. A new War Altar of Sigmar. That's what I want to do.
I would love...
Can you imagine like if we get some Cities of Sigmar prayers and we get like a priest, like a just a human priest on a War Altar? I would buy that in a second.
Yeah, that'd be sick. If there was a prayer lore for our Lord Relictor, our Savior, Lord Relictor.
Oh, God. Yeah, like, can you imagine allying him in and being able to give him a prayer that isn't a Stormcast prayer, like a city's prayer? Oh, I would do that.
Well, there is the universal prayer list, which if you bring a Stormcast priest, you can use it, but they're not great.
They're not great. Yeah, no. The best one for us is probably that command point one, because for the Lord-Ordinator, he goes off on like a 4, I think.
Yeah, it's still not great. It's not great at all.
Yeah.
Not worth running a Relictor in this army.
I really want to see, sorry, this is a tangent, but I really want to see 2 prayer priests. We have level 2 wizards. Why can't we have level 2 priests in this game?
If any army's going to do it, it's going to be Fire Slayers, right?
Yeah, I feel like they have to be. Honestly, I feel like you might end up getting a command trait. Y'all might end up getting like a command trait, be like all the priests in this sub-faction can like pray twice or something.
As a sub-faction ability, that would be great. I would really enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything is better than what they showed for Fire Slayers so far. I really hope those rules from Fury of the Deep are temporary and that they're planning on updating them. All right, bit of a tangent here. Wrapping it up, Stormcast and Cities of Sigmar. They look super fun. This isn't going to last forever. If you're watching this video in like 2023 and the Dawnbringers Crusades are out, you can disregard everything we talked about. Because none of this matters, because they're going to wipe the slate clean. Like they did with Nurgle, like they did with Stormcast. They're going to nerf everything. That's the move going forward with 3rd edition. So, James, are any of these interesting enough to you that you'd want to consider playing them, building up a small little army and playing it before they wipe the rules?
I had the time for it, maybe. Like, I am interested in Living City and Hallowheart.
Yeah, they look pretty good, man. I just want to see Dracolines in Hallowheart. I want to see how silly that could be. It's not even good, but who cares? You get +6 to cast with a Dracoline. Okay, so that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. Next up, we are working on How to Counter Everything number 2, Iron Jaws. Based on what our patron supporters voted on, we're going to be talking about how to counter cabbages, how to counter pigs, brutes, ardboys, any combination of those things, and sometimes Kragnos too. We're going to be doing a Battletome review for Fire Slayers. We have a guest booked for that. And we're working on getting a guest booked for a Battletome review of Idoneth Deepkin. I found out recently that I am starting a Deepkin army, so we're going to talk about it. They look good, man. The Fury of the Deep look
no.
good.
The range is beautiful. No. The range is absolutely beautiful. It's just, for me, the models just be careful. There's a lot of bits and pieces you can easily break. Transporting them is a pain. Also, while playing them, I've broken a few. So,
yeah. Oh dear.
That's all.
Well, I just want a lot of sharks. I really like flying sharks for some reason. That really appeals to me.
Well, there are rumors about that big battle line.
We'll see, man. James, you want to talk about the hobby hangouts?
Yeah, so just hang out weekly with us. We got 3 sessions a week for different locations around the world. Wednesday evenings for the North American crowd, Saturday mornings for the European crowd, and Saturday evenings for the Australian, New Zealand crowd.
Yeah, just hop into our Discord. There'll be somebody in the channel, and just pop in there and hang out, paint models, talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah.
We are working on battle reports. Maybe you heard us chatting a little bit about it throughout this. We're trying to get as many armies together as possible, so it's not just Stormcast versus Stormcast every single time. That would get boring pretty quick. And we are working on that, painting up terrain, getting everything ready. So if you want to consider supporting us, you can hit us up on patreon.com/Stormkeep. You can get early access to podcast videos, vote on upcoming videos, like with How to Counter Everything number 2. That was voted on by our patrons. It narrowly beat out How to Counter Lumineth, so unfortunately we have to wait a little bit longer for that one. You can get tournament reports from the podcast hosts. Mergonk, I think you're working on one for your LVO experience the past weekend.
I'm looking forward to it, yeah.
Yeah, and we also offer a private one-on-one list workshop. So if you have a big event coming up, a lot of places are starting to host big GTs again. I think it's going to become a more regular thing, finally. And if you want some private tutoring, you want help building a list, you want tactics, you want to just chat, then we can do that. We can offer that for you.
Yeah, thanks to our supporters. You guys make all this possible, and honestly, it's so much fun operating this channel. It's all thanks to you guys. So thank you to Champasaur, Sleepa, Marcus, Peppercorn, Ryan Jones, Nick Riley, Pablo Raman, Marcus LT, Spartan 12706, Red Rum Mage, Lens Take, Colic, Grogs, Hot Bear, Bulko, What Are Frogs, Rending, Combat, Tim Andresen, Nick Barber, Dignica, Jack Geiger, Kia Bitson, Stan Wise, Reaper Time, Freda, Mark Knight, Blood Clot Plots, James Nussbaum, Modnar, Party Rapper, Cure Dynamic, and Nekarith on Stardrake.
Yeah, and unfortunately we had one person sign up as I was finishing the slides. He didn't get an edit on it, so Hortensio, I think I got that correct this time. Let me know if I got it wrong. Thanks for subbing. Looking forward to helping you take first place in the Swedish Masters, so that'll be a good time.
Only the faithful.
Yeah, man, they got such a cool format out there. He was telling me about where you sign up a battle tome, and then you find your battle plan, and then you build a list for that battle plan. So like you're not playing a specific list in this tournament, you're playing the whole book, and you can make whatever list you want for each game.
I like that idea. I mean, I guess my only regret would be it punishes people with smaller collections. But if you're like one of those one army, I only play 2 armies so far. So I would love that faction. Like, I'd love that format to play in.
Yeah, if you just have your one list, then you just play that one list and you don't really care, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's pretty cool for people who have expanded collections, let's say.
Yeah. If I'm fighting Skaven and it lets me get my Vanquishers out, why not?
Yeah, that's finally, right? Like all these like techie units you wouldn't use normally. It's like, oh, I'm fighting Skaven clan rats on Apex Predators or whatever one battle line count, right? It's like, okay, Vanquishers might actually be worth it now.
Yeah.
It's a cool format. Okay, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.